Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our December 11th, 2024 Board of Douglas County Commissioners 5:30 business meeting. There are paper copies of the agenda by the door if anyone would like them, and the full packet is available online on our website. For this evening, we have a consent agenda followed by public comment, and then we will have our regular agenda items, which will also be open for public comment relative to those items. When we get to general public comment, I have some comments about that. We will allow each speaker to have 3 minutes of speaking time. Individuals may not donate unused time to other speakers, and all comments must address topics within the jurisdiction of the County Commission. Also, in order to maintain decorum of the meeting, we will prohibit comments that are threatening, aggressively hostile, or belligerent, fighting words, slander, or speech that invades the privacy of individuals, unreasonably loud, disruptive, repetitive, or that interrupt or substantially interfere with the board's ability to conduct county business. We do reserve the right to mute or remove any speaker who violates these public comment rules. At that time, we'd ask for your full name and address for the meeting minutes and to address your comments to the commission. Please know that comments received by the commission during our meetings do not necessarily represent the views of Douglas County government, but that we value the input. We don't usually respond to general public comments on the spot, but if you leave your contact information with county staff, we'll try and get specific questions answered. So with that, we will move to, and lastly, a recording of our meeting will be available on the county's YouTube page and website. With that, we have a consent agenda, and commissioners, first, do you have any items you would like to pull from the consent agenda for further conversation?
No.
Okay.
Got a note.
Robin, can you hear us online?
Yes, but there is a small delay and some fuzziness with the Zoom.
Okay, thank you.
Is that anything we need to work with on our end, or is it good to go?
I think it may mean maybe an internet issue.
Okay, thank you. So commissioners, no items you want to pull from the consent agenda, correct? Is there any member of the public who would like to pull an item from the consent agenda for further conversation? Seeing no one in the room, Sarah, do we have anyone online who would like to pull a consent agenda item? All right, thank you. With that, I would entertain a motion.
Commissioner Reed, I move to approve consent agenda items 1.1 through 1.6.
This is Commissioner Kelly, and I'm going to second that, but I want to point out the good work of staff to reduce by $16,000 our copier lease. I think it needs to be recognized. Thank you, Starla, and the purchasing team. Second.
Thank you for those comments. I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. That brings us to general public comment. Is there anyone who'd like to give general public comment?
My name is Dr. Justin Spees. At last week's meeting here, Michael was speaking and he spoke directly to County Administrator Sarah Plinsky there, and you didn't stop him from doing that there, Karen. But when I came up and spoke, you interrupted me twice when I was talking to Sarah there during my general public comment and said that I had to address you guys. So I'm just wondering why I have to address you guys, but Michael doesn't have to. And so I'm also wondering how I can stand here with this sign that says, Sarah, can you loan me $5? It's addressed to Sarah. Are you going to not allow a sign that's not addressed to you guys there, Karen? Is that a bit of a dilemma there for you? Sarah, can you loan me $5? Sarah, are you enjoying that $41,000 raise already? Sarah, do you think you could donate some of that to get a timer here instead of you having to hold up sheets of paper every 30 seconds? Think we could get a timer here? Or maybe even just like one set up there on the screen. Maybe could we at least do that? What do you think, Sarah? All right, Karen, I'm a little confused here. How come I don't have to address just you guys now? I was asking the sheriff here before the meeting if he was going to have me unlawfully arrested again. He was sitting here in the audience, and he got up and walked out. I told him I had a sign here. I was probably going to say some mean cuss words. I'm going to stand right there. You going to unlawfully arrest me again? He walked out. Might say women have more balls than Patrick too. Uh-oh. So those are serious questions. I'd like to know all the answers to those questions. Why is my sign allowed? Why am I allowed to talk to Sarah? Last week you had to stop me twice. Why was Michael allowed to talk to Sarah without being stopped? Does that sound like discrimination at all? You're singling one person out and applying the rules inconsistently just towards him only?
That's your 3 minutes. Is there anyone else who'd like to give general public comment?
I think the sign laid this bare. When you try to control people's speech, when we have the right to speak, you're going to run into constant issues. When you say that you have the right to remove anybody who is repetitive, or too loud, things like that, the law enforcement here, they're not rule enforcers, guys. This is what we've been trying to teach you for 2 years or more. Law enforcement is not feelings enforcement or rule enforcement. They are law enforcement. So because your rule gets broken does not give you the ability to say, member of the public, you can't be here anymore, bye. And then have your enforcers drag them out. You have a rule, not a law. I don't know how hard that is for you guys to get. There are some laws that you can use, but they require different things to be met that you're not reaching. 51, 29, 21, 59, 22 is what it is. Interference with public duties at a public building or public facility. You could get that one, but not during 3 minutes. Because when you open this floor to the 3 minutes, that's our time to speak, period. So we cannot be disrupting the meeting, no matter how loud we are or how repetitive we are, no matter how loud we are or how repetitive we are, no matter how loud we are or how repetitive we are. When you open that floor for that 3 minutes, that's our time to speak. You can't decide that your law enforcement is going to enforce some feeling that you have that you don't like the words that are being said here. That's not the way that works. That's why you're being sued. That's why other entities around here are being sued. This is absurd. We really do need a clock. But that's why you guys are being sued, because you've tried so hard to control the First Amendment. And I'm going to answer Karen's question, the question for Karen about why she didn't interrupt Justin tonight. Maybe it's because somebody that actually knows the law is sitting in the back of the room and she's too chicken shit to violate it in front of him.
Is there anyone else who'd like to give general public comment? Seeing no one in the room, Sarah, do we have anyone online? Right. Closing general public comment and bring it back to our regular agenda. Our first item is the Douglas County Extension Council Community Partner Agreement.
Jake's going to kick this off.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Commissioners. We have the Extension Council's 2025 Community Partner Agreement on this agenda tonight. During the 2025 budget process, you approved some supplemental requests from the Extension Council, pending further discussions with county staff and Extension Council staff. Those changes are outlined in your agreement, or in the agreement in your packet, and I'll let Marlon Bates, Extension Council Director, provide more context or answer any questions you have.
Okay, thank you. Come on up.
Hello, Commissioners. Marlon Bates, County Extension Director. So last time Extension was on your agenda was during an August work session where we had, I think, a good productive discussion, but we left that meeting knowing that we had some work to do. And so just happy to report that since then, there have been a number of engagements, and I'd say just sort of generally like the mission of those conversations have really been kind of centered on, kind of figuring out, hammering out what an agreement for 2025 might look like, making sure that we're doing what we need to do in order to satisfy any needs related to the supplemental funds that you placed in commissioner items for 2025. And really just kind of like laying the groundwork for how we want to continue to engage. So Sarah and I started in October our bi-monthly meetings. So we have face-to-face conversations. I think actually our next one is coming up right around the corner. After, well, sort of in process, I guess, we've also sort of come up with some ideas. So at a November executive board meeting, the Extension Council reviewed a drafted Addendum B. So Addendum B is a new piece of the community partner agreement that you see in front of you. But we also suggested some edits to the community partner agreement itself. As soon as those were sort of worked over by the council and the executive board of the council and revised and approved, sent those over to your county staff. And we've had a couple of engagements since then and just working to collaboratively put that together. So that's what you see before you, but I'd be happy to provide any other context that you think might be missing or answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any initial questions?
So I just want to make sure I understand it because I got a little confused reading it. There's a section here, it's this section 5 that says the agency, Douglas County Extension Council, is an independent contractor of the county, and the employees, agents, and vendors of that agency are not employees of the county. And then later at the bottom of page 6 or 5, depending if you include the enclosure, it says that we are setting aside $56,300 for the employer-paid portion of the county health insurance plan. Just want to make sure we're clear that the Extension Council's employees are not employees of Douglas County, but they are getting Douglas County health benefits. And is that how we're clarifying that, is that we are setting that aside for health benefits? Can it only be spent on that per the agreement?
On that piece, yes, because that amount actually never, a check is never cut to extension. It
Okay.
is paid, we have a separate line item that goes into the employee benefits fund. So it doesn't ever go to extension, but we wanted to document it as a part of this agreement that is included in the funding that extension receives. And we could make it clear on behalf of extension if that would make, if we're worried that it makes it sound like there are employees, but if the commissioners want more clarity.
Thank you for that. I don't really, I think I just wanted to make sure I understood it correctly, that we are saying there are not employees at the top and then they are getting an employee benefit, but that goes and then.
And it is only just a few of the, it's not all extension employees, so that's also why it's not all extension employees. Some of the employees are covered by K-State, I believe, right, Marlon?
Absolutely correct. Yeah, it's actually a bigger part of the conversation that Sarah and I had was the interesting mix of.
You need to probably pick up the whole microphone. Yeah, thanks.
So that was part of the conversation that we had, was the interesting mix of employees and how they are funded. And then, yeah, so that's just another sort of nuance, another wrinkle. And it's the employer share, not because Douglas County is the employer, but just to kind of delineate between the employee share and the employer share.
We don't pay their premiums, the employee premiums, the employees still pay those. So that's why we say employer.
Is there a specific FTE that we've determined that those dollars go to?
You have an FTE count that it applies to,
Okay.
yes. And I believe if Extension added employees and wanted us to cover that. I think it'd be a part of the discussion, and we'd need to add it to the agreement in future years.
Commissioners, any other initial questions before we go to public comment? No. Okay, we'll have you back in a minute. This is a public comment item. Is there anyone who would like to speak on this item? And seeing no one in person, Sarah, do we have anyone online? All right. Closing public comment, bring it back to the commission, and I will start with a comment. I really appreciate the conversation and the work that's gone into kind of settling on something that works for all parties. So I really appreciate that, and am happy to move forward with what's been put forward, unless commissioners have any other thoughts or comments or questions or motions.
No questions. I just will echo Commissioner Worley's comments and appreciate the additional time and effort put forth. And I really enjoyed and learned some new things in that work session that we had, and hope that these changes are helpful and productive for the coming budget years and in community partnerships. And with that, I can flip to the motion. As Commissioner Reed here, I move to authorize the county administrator to sign the revised 2025 county partner funding agreement with the Douglas County Extension Council.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Really appreciate you being here and the work that went into getting us here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon.
That brings us to our next agenda item, and this is the Douglas County Animal Code update. Sarah, are you presenting this, or we have? Oh, go ahead, Jill.
Good evening, Commissioners. You have a cover memo that outlines the proposed updates to the Douglas County Animal Control Code, which is Chapter 2 of the County Code. Staff's been working on updates to this code, honestly, since shortly after the last update. When the last update was made in December of 2021, efforts were initiated to begin developing procedures for what at the time we thought was going to be an administrative procedure to remedy violations of the code. We subsequently learned that we are unable to do that because some state Court of Appeals rulings that are going to prohibit us from doing that. And I'm happy to provide that information if you'd like to have it. But with the assistance of legal counsel, we were able to determine that we are, in order to remedy violations of the code, we are going to have to work through the district court. And that's just one piece of the updates that are made in this document. As I indicated in the cover memo, overall, these updates were developed to provide greater clarification regarding those enforcement procedures, make some changes to some improvements to some minor spelling and grammatical changes, and then just ensure that we have clarity, consistency, and updated enforceable language so that we can make sure that we have clear and consistent and humane procedures outlined in the code. So I have some bulleted items that outline what those key additions were. So adding, the removal of the administrative hearing officer definition, the addition of the livestock guardian dog as a key piece in this that you'll see in other parts of the code, providing enforcement clarity on some key sections. Again, some more information about how what we mean by livestock guardian dogs and how those will be referenced throughout the code, and the expectations and the circumstances of which. The code for enforcement procedure, so how those violations will be adjudicated. And yeah, and I briefly touched on this in the memo, but county administration and legal counsel County Legal Counsel and Humane Society staff and legal counsel, Katie Barnett, whom I believe she's in the panel here, spent a good amount of time with district court staff, Judge Glover. I think we even had a conversation with Chief Judge McCabria many months ago as well. But we've talked with the district attorney's office about what this process and procedure will look like. There is no intent that every violation of this code will go to the district attorney's office. It is only anticipated that a small number of violations that the Humane Society is unable to remedy will go to the district attorney's office, and that those conversations will be, there will be close consultation about what warrants going through the district court. I know Katie's online to answer questions. Legal counsel John's here to answer any questions that I can't answer, but happy to stand for questions.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do you have anything you want to kick us off with? Because I will, but I wanted to offer first. And these are, Jill, either for you or for Katie Barnett, whoever's most familiar with it. I'm just curious about what kinds of violations are especially top of mind that are needing to be remedied through this enforcement mechanism. Like, what do we have on the table that we're dealing with that we cannot do at the moment?
Katie, I'll hand that off to you. Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Katie Barnett, attorney for the Lawrence Humane Society. The primary issues that we see that we are able to issue citations for at the time are dogs roaming at large and chasing folks. We do have several signed complaints by residents of dogs that have chased them either while they are cycling, walking their own dog, walking to the mailbox, et cetera, on their property. We also have a handful of animal injury cases where animals have been roaming out in the county and have attacked and killed other animals. And currently, we are able to issue a citation for that. We are within the statute of limitations on these. So as soon as this is passed and published and we're able to do something, we will be issuing citations for all of those violations. But these violations are primarily public safety issues. And so we would certainly like to be able to do something about it.
And how many are we talking about that are kind of top of mind right now?
Sure. So we have 11 pending right now. But I will say that's over a period of, I believe, 18 months.
So a relatively small number per year is what's at issue.
That's correct. Small number, but certainly very serious cases. We, of course, have cases of animals roaming and barking at folks, and we've issued citations. We've had a few horses get out and damage the property of their neighbor. We haven't, threatened to issue citations or anything like that. We do take a compliance first approach for all of our enforcement. So while we receive a handful of calls every day that we respond to, the ones that rise to the level of needing a citation and needing enforcement in the district court are the types that I described and the number that I described.
Can you point to me the part where it talks about the compliance first? Because I see a lot of places where it's, a fine or other issues, but talk to me about how that process is captured here.
The county code doesn't capture the compliance first process. That procedure is in our agreement, I believe, with the county. It's the philosophy and approach that the Lawrence Humane Society enforcement officers take. So that's not in here. That's just the way we operate as your partner, as your enforcement arm.
And I know I shared that earlier today with with John, just to give him a little more background on the situation. But we have a separate service agreement that outlines a scope of services, just like with our other partners, that outlines all the activities that are expected of the Humane Society. And that original scope of services was adopted when the commission adopted the previous changes. And I don't think it's changed substantially since then. And they've been providing updates on that ever since.
This might be a Jill question. I know, like with kennels and things like that, we already manage that through our zoning and codes. and there's a process for that. And I believe this is meant to match that process. Does it add to it, or did we already have the ability to manage kennels as needed?
Let me get to that section. I know we made
You've always had that ability. But once we took over, Lawrence Humane took over as the enforcement arm, we also assist. So we kind of take a approach of assisting your codes enforcement with reports and with inspection of those kennels. And violations of those are outlined in the county code here.
Which organization then would take point on that? Would that still come to zoning and codes and be processed as a complaint there, or would it first come from the Humane Society through this code?
To be completely honest, anyone who receives a complaint just calls the other agency and we kind of co-respond.
Yeah, I think that, and that happened earlier this month, right, Katie? I think there was a one that you were case conferencing, so to speak, on with our codes department.
So when I read through them, there are some violations that the dog then would be called dangerous, and some that are not to that same level, but if they occur and recur repeatedly, then that can be the owner itself is out of compliance. There was a term for that in here. Some of those are the dog being off the property, the dog barking, or killing chickens, including, as I read it, if it kills the owner's chickens, somebody could still complain about that. And as I read through this, as a rural resident, I'm not sure I know anyone that hasn't violated some part of this animal code at some time. And that makes me a little worried that when we're trying to cast a net to cover these kind of vicious or biting or those kinds of things, that we're actually capturing a lot of things that are just normally worked out between neighbors in the rural area.
I'm happy to respond to that. Certainly, we don't go out unless we receive a complaint. So if a dog is chasing someone, we wouldn't know about it without someone calling us and letting us know that they don't like that. Or perhaps they couldn't work it out with a neighbor. We certainly had another incident last week where an animal wandered onto a property and attacked a dog laying on its own property and caused injury to it. And we didn't know about that without receiving a complaint. So if neighbors can't work it out, there's always this code. They can call us and issue a complaint to us. We also certainly try and balance, and myself, I too am a rural resident. I live in the unincorporated area of the county. And we certainly just tried to balance when we originally drafted it and when we updated it, the freedom to do what you want in the county with also the freedom to be able to walk to your mailbox and to have your dog lie on your 5 acres without being attacked by your neighbor's dog. And so while we agree people should certainly have freedom, and we're not trying to bring in City of Lawrence city code language and make this like everyone has to have a 6-foot privacy fence, we did write this with the idea that there's a balancing act of public safety that we do have to consider, and the right for people to enjoy their own property out in the unincorporated area of the county.
So, and I appreciate that. I'd like to separate a little bit. You talked about, a dog that's chasing, that's an issue. A dog that attacks another dog, that's an issue. But what's written here is that a dog that is off the property, a complaint can be filed that alleges the animal is found outside the real property lines of the owner. That's a complaint that alleges. It doesn't even require evidence at that point. And that's not that anything has happened. It's just that the dog is not there. That's one that feels like we're not regulating what the problem is. We're regulating something that happens way before the problem. And you're then at the mercy of a neighbor who likes you well enough to say, hey, this happened. Can we do something about it? And that's the part that makes me worried that maybe we're going against some of what is kind of accepted in cultural norms for how we manage relationships with neighbors and relationships with dogs. How can we cast that net to capture those things that are a danger? So we're like, health and safety issues, but not things that are culturally pretty normal?
Well,
Maybe that's a question for other commissioners to, as I'm weighing with this too.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Lee, can you expand a little bit on what your last comment, like what, from your perspective, feels culturally normal that, like, can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. Everybody that I thought to talk to about, hey, could you come and tell your story, was somehow in violation of this, and I didn't feel it was right to ask them to come and talk about it. But it's very normal for somebody's dog to show up on somebody else's property, even regularly. And if it's a problem, you talk to the neighbor, and if it's not a problem, you just kind of shrug and let it go. And yet, the way this is written, if a dog is, cited as being off your property 3 times, it becomes labeled as a nuisance animal. That was what I was looking for. So the 3rd time involving the same animal in any 24-month period could result in your dog being taken away from you, and you don't have the right to recourse. That I can tell, it's at the discretion of the animal officer, the enforcement officer. So that's one that every dog I know has been somewhere that they shouldn't be at some point. It's part of the training process too. So being off the property is one that falls under nuisance if it reoccurs. Barking is another one, and the killing or damaging of fowl that are kept. And it doesn't really even have, I don't think, a carve out for if it kills your own chickens, which most people don't turn their own dog in for killing their own chickens. It's something you train through, but you can imagine the situation of a domestic dispute where one person owns the dog and is attached to it, and the other person uses that, against them. It seems like it's open for that. So maybe I'll rephrase it as a question. What is I'm looking at it this way, but what is the least offensive thing that could fall afoul of this and trigger all of these circumstances? Because when I read it, I see like a dog being off the property 3 times in 24 months, then starts a court process that then ties up our legal system.
Well, certainly, like I said before, we have to receive a complaint. So in the fact pattern that you presented, if someone was okay with the dog being on the property, then we wouldn't receive a complaint, nothing would be investigated, and no citations would issue. And if they didn't like the dog wandering onto their property, because they do have a right to enjoy their property that they own out in the county, then, and we do have as written and has been written previous to this update, that you can't have your dog wandering onto other people's property, then they can issue or they can call Lawrence Humane to issue a complaint. And then for the nuisance animal, that is a citation and a finding and order by the district court 3 times. And so that means that not only did someone complain of a violation, that box has to be checked. Lawrence Humane has to investigate it and find that there was a violation. That box has to be checked. It has to go to the DA's office. They have to agree with the finding and agree with the citation before they'll issue a hearing date. That box has to be checked. And then you have to go before a judge, and the judge hears both sides of the story to decide whether or not there was a violation, and that box has to be checked. And there has to be a conviction. Once there's a conviction, then it could count toward the nuisance animal. And this is all language that you've already had, just for the other commissioners. And so, I mean, we would certainly be going back and undoing a lot that was already in place. But this is primarily so folks can enjoy their own property and be safe out in the county, because public safety is our #1 concern.
So within that, the off-property or the barking or the chickens, if the 3 times in 24 months and labeled as a nuisance animal, and one of the things that happens then is that dog would be leashed and muzzled or otherwise securely restrained, even if leashed and muzzled, even if some of those things were not violent offenses. So that just, I'm raising concerns that I had when these were passed, and I was not on the commission at that time. And I also raised concerns that my neighbors had discomfort with this when it was passed. That may be a larger discussion than what we get into tonight, and I recognize that. It also might be a discussion that is better had when we have some more rural representation on the board, which we'll get when we have the 2 new commissioners, and just another chance to kind of put this out in front of the public that live in the unincorporated area or visit the unincorporated area to make sure that we're striking the right balance of being able to manage the problems that we have, but not creating problems for other people to enjoy their property and ownership without harming the animals or having the animals be punished for things that are, you know, not health and safety related.
Commissioner Willie, can I ask you a question?
Yes,
So
please.
these have been in place for some time, right? And so my understanding is the complaint has to be filed and an enforcement officer has to come investigate the complaint and then the dog will be impounded. Are you say there were concerns voiced. Have you heard of dogs or other animals being impounded in a way that because the code was not, they didn't think they violated, like for example, you used if a dog was on someone's property, do we know of instances where a dog was on someone's property and enforcement came, issued a citation and impounded the dog?
I'm not sure they've had the ability to issue citations until we pass this update, which is the enforcement piece. Would that be correct, Katie? Am I saying that right? We haven't yet had the ability to issue citations, and that's been part of what the update is needed for, right?
That's correct.
So I'm just trying to determine, I think, I almost asked the sheriff, but I'm not going to, Jay. So, you know, that I think sometimes we have code, like a building code, that people may violate that building code. There may be a complaint, and then it's up to the enforcement officer to go see if we can work it out before it gets into district court to get, even though they're in violation of the code, we're not taking them to district court. I can think of a few car lots we have out in the unincorporated area that are in violation of the code, but we haven't taken them to district court. We're trying to work to change behavior. That's the way I think of this. But if we have evidence that people are using the code to make life difficult for their neighbors unsubstantiated, I think that just gives me a different lens than what I'm expecting.
I think there are 2 kind of safety places built into this, and one is that it being complaint-based. That's not really written in here. That's part of our culture of it. So I'm not sure that captures it entirely. And the other would be that presumably it goes to district court and there's another outside lens applied at that point so that things might not go that far, but they would go far enough to go to district court, which is, you know, its own issue. Sarah, I think, would like to say something.
No, I just would say that our zoning codes are similar. You know, we don't say that we are compliant or complaint-based and compliance first in our zoning codes, but that is our philosophy of operation. Because that's our own staff, we can manage that. But, you know, I think, you know, I do wonder if, you know, if there's a concern, we could try to be more clear in the Lawrence Humane Society service agreement in terms of that philosophy and approach to make commissioners feel better that we're all on the same page in terms of communication.
Commissioner Reed, so I just want to add my perspective, and a little nervous to wade into these waters, and will preface and say, obviously I'm not an attorney. I do not have a legal degree, nor do I practice law. But my understanding of criminal statutes, for example, on a state level, with few exceptions, it is all by default complaint-based. It requires somebody to file a police report with some jurisdictional law enforcement agency related to a crime that they allege and that they've experienced. And then it becomes law enforcement's job to investigate that right and determine whether or not there's any statutes that have been in fact violated. and submit, similar to how Katie went through this process, submit an affidavit and that evidence and information to the district attorney's office, who would then decide if, based on their burden of proof and their statutory obligations, had enough proof to move forward. So there are a few examples, such as, many states, including Kansas, have mandatory arrest laws related to domestic violence, which in certain circumstances can mean that even without a complaining victim, that legal action can take place. But in those instances, the statutes explicitly state that that is possible for law enforcement to use their discretion within their jurisdictional authority. Every other law that can be violated and that you can be criminally charged with, generally speaking, requires a police report and a complaint to happen first. So I don't know if that helps give any context to you, Commissioner Willie, and I can understand your concerns from a philosophical perspective and thinking through sort of a worst case scenario of how this code theoretically could be used as a form of harassment in and of itself. But I think to that, I would say we have to really trust the expertise and process of those who we are contracting with for enforcement in order to be available to really prioritize and address issues that are sincere safety issues, a public safety threat that has not been dealt with through either neighborly conversation, some sort of mediation role that the Humane Society may play, or the sheriff's office if they're involved, before it would escalate to the potential criminal complaint being filed. Because the complaints filed by a neighbor about violation of this ordinance is not in and of itself criminal yet. The district attorney filing a case is what makes it a criminal complaint. And Katie, if I misspoke about any of that, please correct me.
No, I have no corrections, Commissioner.
I did want to add too, there was a lot of disappointment on Katie and I's part that we were not able to have an administrative procedure for this and that we would have to go through the district court. It was a huge source of frustration that we had to come to terms with. And I think, the conversations that we had with the district attorney's office and with Judge Glover when we got closer to what would look like to operationalize this, we really talked a lot about this would only be in circumstances where Humane Society was unable to come to a resolution, but yet complaints are still coming in and they feel an obligation to be able to respond. And I know that's certainly the case with some of the ones that Katie talked about.
And just to make it crystal clear for the community or public, the reason why we cannot have an administrative procedure is because it is not allowed by state statute.
Pretty good reason. So I wanted to pivot a little. I really appreciate the carve out for livestock guardian dogs. That's a new addition, and I'm really glad to see it. It does ask for them to be registered with the Humane Society, and I would love for that to be, after a complaint, that the fact that they don't know that changed and they didn't register it, is not in itself a violation, that would come after the fact. And I recognize that that's part of that working towards compliance, but that might be something I'd like to see spelled out a little bit more. Commissioners, I do know that this means more to me than others at the moment, but I do appreciate the input and the framework for it. And I do want us to have the ability, and it's through our partner with the Humane Society, to manage violations where dogs are being harmed or dogs are causing harm. I just want to make sure that we write that where it really is a health and safety issue and not so much of an inconvenience issue.
I'm glad you brought up the livestock dog, because I had a question there. I was just sort of waiting on it. My understanding, Katie and Jill, was that if an animal was not in compliance with the code and they weren't a registered livestock dog, really all I could read in the code was being a registered livestock dog means that no one has to live on the property. There are no other rules that apply, that are waived because the animal is a livestock dog. Is that correct?
That's correct, Commissioner.
So if someone did live on the property and they wanted to register it as a livestock dog, they really couldn't do that, could they? I mean, they wouldn't need to. I don't know what, I
They
guess my
wouldn't.
question is like, I don't know what benefits other than it being able to be on a property they don't live on goes with the registration.
There's not a lot of benefit
Right.
Yeah.
there that but the issue was a house on the property. Most of us that live on a farm, in order to get a mortgage on your home, it's a carve out. So it's a 3 or 5 acre carve out, which means if I have animals there on my farm, that's not a parcel that has a house on it. That parcel might be over the hill. You might not see the house. It's just one of those things of offering some protection that, whether it's complaint based or not, that you are not in violation to have a dog that performs a very normal and very humane function.
I think the intent of registering them was there have been circumstances, and I'll let Katie correct me, of livestock guardian dogs that have been on property that they're not working, so to speak, and locating where those dogs belong. The registration, by having them registered, it would be a way that the Humane Society, when responding to dogs roaming at large, that they would know who they belong to. But I'll let Katie respond.
Sure. We have received several complaints of what ended up being livestock guardian dogs chasing folks out in the county. Of course, Lawrence Humane has an opinion on the livestock guardian dog thing, but we have worked diligently with the county as a partner to try and achieve this goal of allowance of a livestock guardian dog, even though all of our data and everything that we have collected in the time that we've been performing enforcement tells us that this isn't a great idea. But with having a registry, we are able to, when a dog is out chasing someone, we're able to say, hey, this dog belongs to so-and-so. If it's microchipped and registered, we have their contact information and we can reach out to them. It's kind of why people have, licensing of all animals in city limits. Is so when an animal is found, they know who the owner is and they can get in touch with them to get them home quickly. And if the animal has bitten or attacked someone, that they know exactly where to go and who to talk to get that animal into a rabies quarantine, which is required by state law. And so when we have dogs that are just roaming and we don't have any idea who they belong to because there's no house associated with it, it creates a real problem for rabies confinement orders and dog bites, and just simply trying to get them back home is our primary concern. Was just that we could find their owner quickly and get them back to whatever pasture they belong to. And so that's where the registry came from. Without it, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, for Lawrence Humane to issue a citation, because oftentimes the land that those animals are found on or that they're working are not owned by the owner of the dog. And so all of the registry was to make sure that we could enforce, violations of the livestock guardian dogs had.
So if I may, there was a conversation where I met with staff and with Katie Barnett, and neither of us is happy with this solution, I think is what you're hearing. But this was a compromise to carve out that this is a needed and humane need in the county for livestock protection, for soil health and rotational grazing. My own animals, because I don't have a livestock guardian dog, they have to be put in the barn, and then it's actually less good for their overall health than if they could be out and about. So this is something neither of us were super excited about, but this was the compromise that was come to, and I'm glad to have it. So, commissioners, are there other questions? We'll have to open this up for public comment also. Okay. This is a public comment item. Is there anyone that is with us here today that would like to make any public comment on our animal code? Gosh, just me. Sarah, do we have anyone online?
We do. I'm going to promote Gene Dorsey into the panel. He's got some public comment.
Okay.
Gene, you're in the panel. You can come off mute and provide your public comment.
Hi, Gene Dorsey here. I learned a couple of things when I was looking into this, and that is one, some sheep dealers prefer llamas or donkeys to guard animals and not dogs. And I asked the county administrator about that, and she said since those are livestock animals, that didn't need to be addressed, but I just thought I'd bring that up to you. Two other comments. One is I'd like to know how you settled on a $25 registration fee, because I believe this is going to add cost to the Humane Center eventually in enforcement, and I would rather see that $25 fee at 50 or 100 to help cover some of the cost. And then finally, I agree with Karen that perhaps this should be deferred until January, when you have 5 commissioners and more rural representation. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else online who'd like to give public comment? Okay, that closing public comment and bring it back to the commission. I would answer the llamas and donkeys was part of the conversation, and I agree with staff that that is not regulated by this code because they are livestock, so they're protected from regulation by state law. In terms of the dollar amount on the fee, we're asking for people to register something that they've already been doing, and I think 25 is plenty, especially because if it's complaint-based, then we should likely not have very many of these coming through, and it shouldn't be an administrative burden, but I would let others weigh in on that if you'd like to.
You know, I rely on staff working with the Humane Society to set the fee where they think it's appropriate, and this doesn't seem overly high or overly low to me for an administrative fee. I would like to hear from my colleagues on Mr. Dorsey's request to have it deferred. I think that's an interesting request from an incoming commissioner. You know, being that I do sort of take issue with this idea that because I do not live in the unincorporated issue, I cannot process or have feelings about these items. I don't think that's true. But I would be interested to hear other commissioners' thoughts on that, maybe we need more rural representation here. Just your thoughts.
Well, since I was credited with saying that, I would say that's not what I said in terms of delaying this conversation. I do think that any code could be reopened by the commission at any time, and I think that that's something that I think it's worth just putting ears out within our neighbors and neighborhoods and in our unincorporated area and spending more time asking about that. Do these protections feel like enough protections for you, et cetera? But I do know that this process has been in the works for a long time. I do recognize that this is the existing code that is on the books. I'm also sensitive to the fact that we have violations of a serious nature that we do not have a way to manage and process now. And those are also rural residents who are dealing with that. So I mean, that's certainly an option that's on the table because this is legislative, that we can take it up at any time we want to. That's a decision of the commission, as opposed to if something were quasi-judicial, like a land use application where we have an applicant who has right to due process. So I think we have the right to delay this if we would defer this if we wanted to. I'm just not sure that that's quite the right way forward, even in the light of the things that I'm uncomfortable with.
I appreciate those comments and that clarification from you, Commissioner Willie. And I also appreciate the distinction about this being a legislative action item before us, in contrast to a permitting land use application. And the distinction between those, for me, I mean, to your point about how this has been these edits and updates have been in process for quite a long time. Jill started this agenda item presentation with saying that pretty much soon after we passed it as a commission nearly 3 years ago, it was revealed that there were some further things to work through because of those changes or because of those appeals court decisions and changes that were necessitated. So I think that it's been in process for a long time, and therefore a deferment doesn't feel necessary to me. It also doesn't feel right to me because I think in general, and I've vocalized this in other ways and related to other decisions so far, I don't think that it's appropriate or good governance for the current county commission to start trying to sort of do calculus of what is and isn't appropriate to defer or wait for 5 commissioners' input versus the current 3. We have processes that are in place. We have dates that are set for when new elected officials take office. I don't think that, I guess I'd be curious if we hadn't expanded the commission, but that you or I were not reelected in the election and there were new commissioners coming, would the same question be brought up and the same suggestion be made to wait on items at the end of the year or defer them? It just sort of feels like I'm not quite sure what the word is, but it doesn't sit right with me. And I don't think that it's an appropriate way to govern and move forward with processes that are set out and that staff and community partners have been participating diligently in, regardless of election results one way or the other.
Would like to reiterate that that's not what I was suggesting. So
Certainly, my comments are in response to, since the question was raised in public comment, and specifically by an incoming commissioner, I wanted to share my thoughts in response to that.
And truly, any item of code can be taken up by the commission at any time that we would agree to do that. So I know that I will have ears out in the community to see how this sits with people. And that may be something that if I find that there is a significant amount of discomfort with it, that I may come back and ask for that. But at this point, I also recognize that we have no way to solve the issues that are on our plate at the moment, because we don't have an enforcement mechanism. I also do recognize that we have no protections for livestock guardian dogs at the moment, and that is something that is added with this piece also. So I'd say you've heard me out and heard the things that make me uncomfortable, and I appreciate that very much. Commissioners, other thoughts, suggestions, edits, or motions?
Without hearing any suggested edits explicitly through our conversation, I'm ready to move forward with the motion. As Commissioner Reed, I move to approve the revisions to County Code of Douglas County, Chapter 2, Animal Control through County Resolution number 24-36.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? I will go ahead and log my opposition, and just so that we keep that conversation open and alive, but I do very much value the input of my commissioners. So motion passes. Thank you. And that brings us to our next regular agenda item, and that is our judicial and law enforcement addition and remodel. And I believe we will have some folks here to talk about that.
Commissioners, it's my pleasure to introduce the design team on this project to the podium.
Good evening. Give me just a second here and we'll pull up the PowerPoint. Sometimes technology works and there it is. Sometimes it doesn't. Well, first off, I want to say good evening. Secondly, we have reached a milestone that, to be real frank and honest, it's a pretty great time for this project, and I hope you feel the same way. I know our team does. We have worked diligently over the last 12 plus months to get to this point. And so I don't want to do a lot of talking, but I do want to thank you, Sarah, the users and stakeholders within this project, and Jay for all their hard work over the last 12 plus months to get to this point. It's not something that we have done or that J.E. Dunn has done to get here. It's the folks that have spent the time and effort to listen to us and give us their input and produce what we have today and what's going to begin to be constructed here in January. So with that, let me see if I can do this. Oh, yes, thank you, Sarah, with
Pending.
your approval. I'm going to get rid of that thing because that's wearing me out. All right. So today I just want to walk through a handful of things. Most of this you saw at the work session. The last part, Tim with J.E. Dunn will come up and talk through those pieces. So that will be the part that we're going to handle. I'm sorry, I'm working through some technology here. I click buttons and it doesn't shows me, but doesn't show that. So it's a me thing? All right. Sorry. I believe you saw this a couple weeks ago with the timeline. So with that being said, what I would share with you is we are at the December 2024 there on the right-hand side to talk about the GMP. As you can see, we've gone through a multitude of different stages and places within this project to get to this point. So first, I'm going to talk about the public safety building. So as you are aware, the public safety building has a couple of pieces that we are working through. One is the final design shows the new dispatch center. It shows the emergency operations and emergency management piece as being the built-out component there in the middle. And then the rest is shell space that we'll talk about later, but you can kind of see again where this fits within the site, part of what we've talked about in the past as well. So nothing new, nothing's changed within our documents to get there. You can see here is the base bid that we had that was shared with the contractors to look at and provide a construction cost for to go ahead and build. So we've got the lower level, which includes dispatch and EOC, and then a shelled portion on the upper level for future use. Then we had the alternate number one. There's a piece in this that we'll talk about in a little bit about the alternates, but I wanted to share this a tad bit just as a refresher. Alternate one did include the rest of the shelled area on either side of the base bid as part of the construction on that site. It does include to the left a, golly, I just lost my train of thought. It does include evidence storage for the sheriff's staff. And then on the right-hand side, a small area for any public that may come to this building for the first stage of the process. We did look at materiality and design for this project. First, to think about the context of the existing jail that's there, but also to think about it as a building that's going to stand the test of time and be a building that's not just here for the next 10 years, but a building that's here for the next 20. This is the full build out. So this does show everything that gets completed at the end of the day when you so choose. We did incorporate on the east side a staff entry space that's going to pop up here in a minute, and some staff parking. You can also see again in the full build out some area for some storage for both EOC, emergency management, and the sheriff's office. Again, materiality, colors, starting to work holistically with the context. We'll talk a little bit about the design of the JLEC, both the renovation portion as well as the addition. Just real quick to go back through and refresh you of that area. So you're going to see on the site the parking area that we did incorporate between both the historic courthouse and the JLEC as well as the new addition. That is the new parking as well as a new entry and walk path to get from the south parking lot into the into the entry at the JLEC. Both these parking areas will serve for both buildings, the courts, the JLEC, as well as for the historic courts. We have not changed much as it relates to design. We worked diligently with J.E. Dunn and the stakeholders to make sure we got a design in the courtrooms as well as throughout the building to meet the needs, but also meet the functions, and then to have a civic presence as well to carry forward a courthouse and what's needed for Douglas County. As we talked last go round, the west elevation does begin to start to think about the language of the rest of the building to again to fit within the context of both the area as well as the existing building. And we did have a good conversation with the Historic Resources Commission and got their approval as well for the design of this building. And then Tim's going to come up and talk about your guaranteed maximum price.
Yes, hello, Tim Ockingay with J.E. Dunn Construction. So we have been busy over the last 2 months since, and while we met with you a month ago, trying to pull together what we call GMP, which is guaranteed maximum price. It is the maximum price we see that project proceeding with. So if you so choose today. I'm happy to say that we had a lot of good interest with the region and in the local community from contractors, which brings value to the project. It drives down the cost for what we'll end up spending on this project if we can get the most amount of bids. So we received 217 bids for 64 separate bid packages, which is about 3.5 bids per package. Anytime we can be over that 3 mark, that's where we really want to be, especially with the market right now is hard to get that amount of involvement. So it shows the interest that we had in this project. This slide shows with all of those bids received after we took the lowest qualified bidder that produced the scope of work that we asked them to bid on. After taking all of those at the base bid, you see the numbers here for both the JLEC and the public safety building separate for a total of $66 million and some change. I'm also going to present some of those alternates that we've been talking about over the last year. What you see on the screen is all of the alternates that we went out to the bidding market and asked them to put a separate price to. So the numbers that are on the screen are not included in the base bid that we just saw on the last slide. The 2 colors represent, the black represents what staff is recommending approval, but we can so choose different items tonight if you would like to think about them differently. So on the JLEC, the first alternate is revising the parking lot that exists between the existing historic courthouse and the JLEC. We'll present a little later on the parking and the parking counts, and because I know that was a concern. This one allows us to increase the parking count in that parking lot. The second one is upgrading the public restrooms in the building that are can feel fairly dated, and it brings them up to modern, all new finishes. Number 3 is we have one courtroom that is shelled out, meaning that it will not be finished out. If we were to accept this, it would finish that courtroom. Right now, what's in the base bid has enough courtrooms for the current needs of the building. This would be for future use if we were to get another judge. Number 4 is building out additional court services. In the base bid, there is enough space for court services today. This would be for future growth. And I should have mentioned, in the next slides, we'll see floor plans of where each of these reside. Number 5 is for solar panels that will occur on the roof of the JLEC. Number 6 is a roofing system. So when we went out to the market, we weren't quite sure what was going to be the most cost-effective roofing system. So we had them provide a base bid price for what's called a TPO roof, and we wanted an alternate price for a mod bit. With talking with staff, the recommendation was to have a mod bit roof, but we didn't know how much premium we would have to spend. Great news is it came in less expensive, so the staff is actually getting what we wanted originally at a less cost. And then number 7 is upgrading some of the lower level corridor finishes with new finishes. That wasn't included in the base bid originally, where we didn't know where we were going to land in the budget. Then on the public safety building, the first one is that expansion of the shell space, that upper floor that we saw a couple slides ago. Number 2 is currently there is a row of skylights that occur down the main corridor spine of the upper floor. This would be to remove those skylights if we so choose. And then number 3 and 4 are related to 2 different parking lots, one on the southeast and one on the north. This parking for that area is not needed until the sheriff, until we finish out that upper floor. We have the parking added for the staff that will be in the lower level in the base bid that will be occupying this building. This parking is really when the fit out of the building occurs. And then the 5th one is solar panels, but in this building, it occurs on the site, not on the roof. So now, am I going through this for you?
You could, if they want to, look at each of those spaces.
Yeah, so, and this may be more reflective for Q&A when we get to it, but what we have here is the locations of each of those alternates for the JLEC. So I won't go through this in detail, but if we need to come back to this, we sure can. I know it's hard to read where those alternates are, but I try to explain them. And then the same for the PSB for the parking lots when it comes up on the left, and then the locations of the skylights and the addition.
So one of the things we wanted to chat about today, because I know there's been a little bit of topic of discussion about the solar panel alternate. So I want to kind of I want to kind of share a little bit about what we did and why we did it. And then if there's some further discussion that needs to be had, Jamie and I and Jay met earlier today, and she can get more technical about it than I can. So we'll ask her to come up and talk about the incentives and things along those lines. So what we have in that alternate for the JLEC is new solar panels that would go on top of the tower and the tower only. That gets you about 120 kW from a standpoint of solar power. We don't have a whole lot going on that roof, so everything from a mechanical perspective, electrical perspective is within the building itself, so in the lower level. So we don't have rooftop units, we don't have skylights, we don't have those types of things. So that roof really lends itself to being able to capture those panels. Plus, we don't have excess land area, let me put it that way. Parking's a premium, right? So trying to create solar panels in the parking area or on the park or those types of things probably would not be as advantageous. So this made a heck of a lot of sense, and to be able to build that. And it also allows for expansion down the road. So if you wanted to do that on the existing building, you could so choose to do that. And then the solar panel for the JLEC, for the PSB, So on this one, through our design process, and in August, we were, since we didn't know what the alternate was going to look like, right? We chose to move the solar panels to a ground mounted that would be in, outside the building itself. So by doing that, although we've located it here, still allows us to get direct connect to the site and to the building. If you so chose to actually go to and think about adding solar panel, or sorry, adding the full alternate number one of the PSB, you can see to the left slide that I've just added, by the way, today to try to help explain what happens on the roof of the PSB. So you can see there the blocks that show the skylights in the middle that Tim talked about to go down the public, the corridor space. And then to the left of that are rooftop units. So the mechanical on this building, for this building, is not within inside the building. We have rooftop units, we have some ground mounted equipment as well. So to try to put solar panels on top of the building, it would limit the amount that you could have. And so we don't want to separate out the amount of panels. So as you can see there on the right-hand side, it shows what we would see for the 135 kW panels. You can see that you're probably going to get maybe a third of that panel within the existing on the building roof if you so chose to expand out the building itself. So for us, it made a heck of a whole lot of sense to be able to do that off the building itself in lieu of on the building. That way we can capture more. It also allows for expansion, easy expansion. So one of the other things that has happened between the design phase and here most recently is the state has, the state has, Evergy has now expanded. So what used to be 135 kW to be able to be had on a site, they actually are now allowing 150 to be the maximum before you have to go to metering, and you know way more than I do about this. So we're really going to start to dive into the least amount that I know. So what I'm sharing here is the ability to be able to expand can happen and get to the 150 if you so chose within what we've got shown here. And then if you chose to actually add more, you could do that as well on the site itself down the road. I just wanted to make sure we cleared that up because I know there's some questions and thoughts about that. If there's others, we'll be more than happy to answer it if that didn't answer those questions. And I know Jamie can come up and talk about a lot more of it than I can. Does that help?
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have some
Excellent.
questions as
Great.
we go.
Okay, so with the staff recommended alternate, if you were to add those into the GMP, the values increase to what's shown here to be the total of just under $71.5 million for the GMP. This is the construction portion of the budget, and Jay will speak to the overall project budget.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jay Zimmershed, Douglas County. So as Tim just presented, the GMP values for staff recommended alternates are included in the two black lines you see here. Then traditionally, what you've seen in county projects, we built in the soft costs associated with that, and that's what is represented by the blue lines that you're seeing. And so what we're anticipating and looking at this for the county as a total project budget is the bottom number of the 81.9 million that you're seeing here. Again, these include staff recommended alternates. So based on what this body believes is the right direction to move forward, that number could certainly change, but this is where we're currently planned now. I think it's, no, go ahead.
I was going to interrupt you, Jay. I think it's important to FF&E stands for furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And inside the professional services and contingency include things like the design fee, fees that we have to pay to the city of Lawrence for water hookups and different things like that. So a number of professional services that are required. So while soft costs may sound like something that could be not done, these are vital pieces to the project's completion. Go ahead, Jay.
That's great. That's all I have. I think the next slide is Sarah's.
So commissioners, as we were reviewing these final numbers from Jay Dunn. There it goes. Yeah, we're just cloggy internet tonight. I know. Right. Starla's on it. I went back and looked at the existing funds that we have available to support this project that you all were presented with on the 20th of November. At that meeting, we talked about the $20 million in cash that is sitting in the CIP sales tax fund that is available to cash fund the project. And we talked about the debt structuring of the 60 million to 68 million. And that debt structure would come from existing revenues that are already coming into the CIP sales tax account. And we reviewed our sales tax projections, and it's at it could support at 2% growth. We budgeted for all of these at a 2% revenue growth rate. The 60 million reflects if we don't structure the debt to get larger in 2033 when we pay off our other debt project. 68 million would be if we did want the payment to get larger after we pay off that 2033 debt issuance. In addition to that, I worked with Brooke Sauer, our finance manager, about what existing funds did we have on the current JLE master plan and revision and expansion. As we talked about on the 20th, this is a project that's been in our CIP since 2015. So a long time, 9 years in development. We have set aside cash on hand for this project over time, and we've used that cash to pay for design up to this point. As of January of 2025, there will be $1,999,124 remaining available on that project. And yes, if you've done the math from what was on the previous slide to this, it is very close. I would have to say that is coincidental. The 1.9 or 2 million that's sitting there is what we had on the project, and you saw that as a part of your 2025 CIP review. If we had needed more than that to get where we felt we needed to be from this project, I think we would have either gone to a larger debt structure, so in addition to the 60 million, or we do have CIP contingency funds that we could access if we wanted to. It's my recommendation. I really wanted to try to stick closer to that $60 million in debt number because, 2033 is not that far away, and the county does have a lot of large capital investments, and I want us to be able to access that capacity in 2033 if we need to. And then someone has to push the next button for me. Yep, that's it.
So a couple other things on schedule, and then I want to talk about parking because I know that was a topic of discussion over the last year. If we were to approve the GMP tonight, we are planning to start construction in mid-January, this coming January, so about a month from now. The schedule is the same that we've reported the last couple of months, where we build the tower at the same time as the PSB. They both open up before we start the renovation, and we'll be able to wrap the whole project up in summer of 2027. So one of the topics of concern was parking, and how do parking right now can feel like it's full. What can we do to alleviate some of those concerns with the disruption? So what we've worked through is solutions to get as much as we can for the best value. As you can see in the red box represents when construction starts, the approximate fencing that'll happen to build that tower, and it takes up about half of that existing south lot. During the construction of the tower, we intend to leave the parking lot between the JLEC and the historic courthouse open so that we're not taking more parking offline. And then we've looked at adding 2 new lots during the construction. In the top right of the screen is the Trinity Lutheran parking lot. We've worked with them and engaged with them to lease that parking lot during construction. That parking lot will be used for both construction workers to park in and also some staff, depending on the timing of the project. If it's available, we're going to have be able to have some staff park there to alleviate making sure construction workers are not taking public parking away from the current operations at the JLEC. Additionally, the 1242 Mass property that the county owns in the bottom right, the green portion, that is going to be restriped so that we make sure we can get the most cars in that current lot, and staff will be able to park in that area. The next screen starts to speak to the different parking counts that we can anticipate over the coming years. What you'll see is, depending on the different phases of construction, parking will dip between 40 and 60 spots at certain portions of the project. I can tell you, working with staff, we're trying to minimize it at every one of those points. So anytime we can give spots back, we are going to do that, and we're working towards that every day as we make plans. Trying to think, do you have anything else to add, Jay? Okay. Yeah, access will also be modified. So there will no longer be, you'll no longer be able to access the parking lot from Mass Street. You'll need to go down Rhode Island and come in from the south side, which is what those blue arrows show. And the blue arrows indicate all of the roads that are still remaining open to be able to get to and from the different areas. And then the purple arrow represents that we will still have access to the entrance of the building via the South Park sidewalk that's currently there and used. That'll still remain open for pedestrian access. So at this point in time, I believe we're opening it up for questions that you may have for all of us.
All right, thank you. Commissioner. Commissioners, who would like to start?
Personally, I don't have any questions. That parking slide that we didn't have before pretty much answered my open question that wasn't represented before in the packet we received.
I just have one question right now, and that's about the lower level corridor upgrade finishes is alternate 7. Can you describe a little bit more what that means?
Yeah, so in our base design, it is what it is today. As we looked at that area, it's still a public corridor going to both the DA space and mechanical space and some of the other areas. Because it is a public space, we'd like to be able to have the public finishes that we have on the first and second level. So it does have a tile floor, new paint, new ceiling tile, new lights, those types of things that would happen in that area. So it would be very similar from the finishes that we have on the main level.
And would it be similar to the tower at that point? Would
Yes.
the finishes match the tower? Okay.
Yep, so all the public corridor spaces, both tower and renovated area will be the same.
Okay, thank you.
That actually does remind me of one question I had going through. It seems like with the recommended, staff recommended alternates that all public bathrooms will be updated, correct? Are we leaving any out?
No, we are not.
Okay, thank you.
And just talking a little bit about the alternates, and I know we've had a lot of discussions leading up to this time, and I feel like our priorities have been heard and are reflected there. I do appreciate the staff recommendations. I know the bathrooms was one thing that we had talked about. I want to ask about the skylights, and I think, are there two kinds of skylights in the list? The rooftop skylights over the main corridor in the public safety building, and then some others that reflect some light down into the 911 area. Is that correct?
So the only skylight, so we were able to capture the natural daylighting that's on the exterior of the building that brings the lighting into dispatch and 911 and emergency management. We were able to get that to get accomplished in our base number. So the only skylights that were in the alternate are the skylights you saw along the roof that come down to that corridor space.
And so that natural daylight that's coming into dispatch, is that balanced with, safety and the hardening of that space that was part of the original
Yes.
concern?
Yes, we did. We did that as well to make sure that there's, so one of the things we tried to do is capture that through a borrowed area. So we have some shutters that come down and things along those lines within the inside of the space to create the shelter that's needed.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the roof mount versus ground mount with the solar, and I know the cost was one aspect. I appreciate you kind of showing us the rooftops and the space available also for public safety. In general, would ground mount be cheaper than roof mount? Okay. Do you want to come up
Yep,
and?
yep.
Okay.
You got to make, yeah. This is where Jeff.
Yes, Jamie Hoffling, Sustainability Office for Douglas County. The ground mount systems are more expensive than rooftop, but there are some advantages to doing ground mount. For example, they can achieve a better tilt to angle them more towards the sun that they can do on the ground. It also makes it a lot easier at the public safety building to add on to the systems as the energy needs grow for that building.
And is the cost differential because of the amount of structure that it takes for that ground mount?
Yep, that's right. Yep, they'll be on steel racks on the ground, so.
Okay.
And also has to connect to the building, so there's additional wiring that will take place, and yeah.
Okay. Can you talk at all about the payback time for the cost savings
On the ground mount or?
on the PV systems overall?
Yeah, so the payback on, I did want to mention that we are, as a tax exempt entity, eligible to apply for what are called tax credits, but I like to think of them as more as a rebate. And they're through the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act. They were made available during that act. And we're eligible to apply for them now. That was new. And historically, only tax-paying entities could qualify for those. And that's a minimum of 30% back, cash refund. So we could expect to get that back. And that will reduce our payback time period. So we're predicting about 6-7 years for the JLEC, and just a little bit longer, 8 or 9 years for the payback on the ground mount system for the public safety building. But again, that will be reduced once we've earned back the cash reward, or cash refund, sorry.
And the costs that are included in our alternates, they already take into account that 30%
They do not.
rebate? They do not?
Those do not. Right.
Okay, so that is an additional
addition.
savings over that. And is it because we can't bank on that until we've seen it? Is that the reasoning?
Yes, and we need to pay for it up front.
That's right.
Got it. All right.
Could be additional, there are add-ons that, according to the solar company, that we could also qualify for, but I can't verify that right now, but that could be an additional 20% for JLEC, an additional 10% back on the public safety building.
Okay. And in terms of the permitting with the utility, are there any obstacles for that, or has this all been sized and kind of working in that direction?
That's right. Yep, this is sized for net metering. So that's just one of the billing mechanisms that we have with Evergy available to us. Parallel generation is the other one. Net metering is seen as more attractive because it's one-to-one match with what's received and what's produced from the panels. So this does fit with that, and yes, we are good to go with we would be good to go with the permitting, and we would work with J.E. Dunn would work with the solar company to achieve that permit.
Thank you. Any other questions on solar? Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
I had another question on the shelling of the rest of the public safety building. And I know that there will be some probably fairly small, but cost savings for that based on being able to park or being able to use to get rid of the leased space for the dive team.
Yes, Commissioner, I talked to the sheriff about that, we're currently renting space to house our dive team gear and boat. And all in, that is about $28,000 a year that we're spending on that. In addition to that, I followed up with about the mobile command post, and that's being stored here at Public Works that, and I'm trying to figure out if we're moving both the mobile command post and the trailer. There's also an emergency management trailer that would move out there. We were looking to perhaps build a structure for the trailer here if this didn't get approved, and that's around 35,000 right now is our initial estimate for what it would cost to build that. So we would, if the shell is approved, we would not need to do that as well. And those are the two kind of three pieces between the dive, the command post, and the trailer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I will, one last question on permitting, and this might be a Sarah question, but we have all of our, I mean, we still have building permits that would be pulled when we get closer to the time, but all of our planning approvals and such, have those already
They've
gone
been
through and
secured.
approved?
We have been approved by Planning Commission. And Commissioner, I also want to add, if we're thinking about costs that can go into offset some of this, we have been waiting really to decide what to do next with 1242 Massachusetts until this project was approved. I think if this project is approved, we can bring to the commission in the new year conversations about, is that a building that we want to retain in the county's portfolio, or is that something that we could perhaps sell? Selling buildings for counties is not as simple as hiring a realtor and putting a sign in the yard. So there is a number of things that we would have to go through with that, but that's a possibility that we'd want to keep it through construction because we need the parking. But it is one of those things that we could look at later. And I also think that, I think we will have some conversations too as this project evolves. We currently lease space at 1006 New Hampshire, which houses our Criminal Justice Services Adult Division and Community Corrections, plus some administrative staff. Depending on the timing and the sheriff's office departure, if we're able to move forward and get the shell and move forward quicker on realizing space in the PSB, potentially that's something that we could re-examine. Do we want to stay at 1006 New Hampshire? I'm reluctant to commit on these things. As commissioners know, I like to hedge my bets. And I just think a lot of things can change in the meantime. If we get 2 more district court judges, we would need to reutilize or use that space differently. So, but those are all possibilities that we can do to reduce our ongoing annual impact related to this project.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Those were the last set of questions that I had, so you got there ahead of me. Commissioners, are we ready for public comment? Yep. All right, this is a public comment item. Is there anyone who is here with us who would like to speak about this project? Okay, I think we have one.
Hi, Sheriff Armbruster. I am a citizen of Douglas County. So quickly, a couple of things. I just want to, I kind of want to reiterate a point that I've made pretty clear throughout this process. With the PSB, I'm very glad to see that the shell space, I understand that it will be a shell, but as we work through the law enforcement center, there is a space within there that we have currently that is our evidence bay. It is, for you historians, it is the old jail gymnasium, but that is a large space that once it's emptied out, will be able to be utilized for many different things. I just want to make it clear that I don't want to move everything inside of there any more than one time. So if we could, and Jeff, when he put the drawing up there, there was a little green place within there that is built out early. There had been some talk about moving our evidence into some space that is currently occupied on the same floor with us, so that the construction can happen. I just simply don't want to do that. That is a logistical nightmare. You're hardening spaces that are not intended to be hardened and securing it, and this is evidence. So I'm up here to reiterate if I have to stomp my feet, I will do so, but I just really want to make sure that we only move our evidence bay one time. And quickly, as far as the solar panels, I would honestly love to see a place where we get to like the Merck, where we have covered parking for employees and incentivize them to get EVs, where we could have trickle chargers for them, where they could park their car during the day and they could plug into our solar panels above their head and leave their car under covered parking. But that's just, I just thought of that while I was sitting back here, so I thought I'd throw that out there. Any questions, you know where to find me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to give public comment? Seeing no one else in the room, though I know many of them have thoughts. Sarah, do we have anyone online?
We do not.
Okay, I'm closing public comment and bringing it back to the commission. And I believe the conversation about the moving of evidence storage was, a big conversation in our work session, our study session that we had. And yeah, moving it twice was certainly one of the things that brought it forward in terms of moving forward with parts of the public safety. I'm assuming that that is included in this, the shell space also includes that evidence storage.
Correct.
I did have another question, but commissioners, I've been hogging, so. Okay, I'm almost done then. So if we have the conversation about 1242 Massachusetts or other places where we're kind of looking for funds that can be freed up to add to our CIP for the rest of the build out, do we have some that kind of rise as the top priority beyond what's being looked at here? Are there pieces of the sheriff's office that, are really the high priority in terms of maximizing space? And maybe we haven't thought that far ahead, but that
Isn't
may be-
included in the project today.
that is not included in the project today.
I think, the next thing really comes moving sheriff's operations to the PSB. So, that allows us to have more space and more parking, frankly, in downtown. So I think that would probably rise up and still be a project in our CIP related to how we finance that. And as the commissioners know, our CIP is financed with cash that you dedicate each year as a part of your annual budget process, and year-end funds that we have available above estimation that we can put on that we can do. So I really think that between the next 2 years, we're going to make a lot of progress on that, and that I hope we can expedite that piece. Did I answer the question that you were asking?
So I think what I'm hearing is that next move of moving the sheriff's office will be all in one piece. So we'd be saving up money for like one move as opposed to piecemealing anything else from this point.
Commissioners, I would want to visit with the sheriff and see what it would take to do that. I think we'd want to see that. We also would need the parking at that point. So the parking alternates that were not taken tonight would have to be included in that. But I don't want to commit to that. But right now, I think we are thinking they kind of move all at once. The sheriff has been very generous in this conversation around not wanting to be in so many locations at once. He's one of the few departments that is in 2 buildings and in 3 buildings. And so I think it would make more sense to move all of that to the PSB.
I would briefly address the potential for covered parking PV system. I think those are really expensive, so that might not be today's issue, but we can put it on the radar for, depending on what you want first, to move the sheriff's office or do the parking. So, commissioners, I think I'm done with my questions. What thoughts do you have, or motions or progress?
I'll just share a few thoughts. One is that I appreciate all of the recommendations from staff about the alternates, and that was really inclusive of everything that mattered to me. So I'm grateful to see that those were all included, and I suppose also cool that the coincidence of the math worked out in such a way that that we are able to use leverage quite a bit of cash that we have right now to make this project fiscally feasible and fiscally conservative enough that I feel really, especially after that presentation we had from Sarah recently with the spreadsheets and the conservative estimations of how we will rebuild the I'm sorry, how we will finance rather the bond through that conservatively estimated revenue growth year to year. I feel really confident about that. And, in recent weeks, I have been going through a bit of sorting process of notes and materials from earlier this year. So I had the opportunity to sort of reorganize and shuffle back through notes and materials about the progress of this conversation just in the past year. And as we've recapped recently, that's been a multi-year process, but we've certainly had a lot of in-depth conversations this year. And it just stood out to me that it was an iterative process in that way, and that we really, given some of the broad options and varying sort of price points and opportunities given to us originally, that I feel really confident with where we've landed, both fiscally and in that we are really working hard to meet the needs of multiple county departments and offices and agencies that are critical core functions for the county, and making sure that we, with the incorporation of the public safety building in particular, really strike a balance of moving as many of those departments and agencies and entities forward into space that is built for them and has capacity for the growth that we know is inevitable in the coming decades. And so I would just reflect on that as I went back through my own personal notes and some previous agenda items, and think that it's been a really productive process to get us here. And so thankful for everybody's participation in that, and feel really confident about where the numbers are at. And, I also just I've mentioned at a couple of previous meetings, but want to reiterate that it's my hope and goal that it is not a too far down the road conversation that the county commission is having about finishing out that public safety building. I think that seems really within reach. And so having the building completely shelled out and all the infrastructure done and ready to just fit in fixtures and furniture and walls, so that it's a fully functional space, is a hope that I have for the relatively near future, because I think that's within reach. I think that the way that the budget has come together and the potential, growth in those funds over the next few years, that feels possible. And I hope that the commission is interested in prioritizing that and figuring out how to, for the purposes of lessening the impact on the sheriff's department, but also just really making the most efficient use of having a new building in the county's portfolio that's really built to efficient and contemporary standards, and move 3 critical departments into that as quickly as possible. That's my hope.
We've had a lot of meetings on this, and so we've talked a lot, and I think it's important to reflect that the plan that we see today is not the plan we had 6 years ago. We've talked about different buildings and different spaces, and I think that's a real tribute to Jay and to Jeff and to all of our partners, the sheriff's office, the courts, the trustee, all those different groups, the DA, IT, emergency management. I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, emergency communications, but I think that's a good process when we have some tensions and do some problem solving around some of the tensions. Certainly it isn't what everybody wants. I'm sure there were spaces of loss, but I think, to Commissioner Reed's point, it feels like it's been a robust process that has been collaborative all along the way. I do want to make a case, if we approve shell space, and I hear Commissioner Reed say, I want to finish it off quickly. I just want to offer a perspective, having done a large building project that had shell space involved, and we got down to the end, we took the alternate and finished it. And then 2 years later, we tore it out, because I think having some shell space is not necessarily bad as you see how humans adapt to the building. We'll know more once that building is finished about how we might use it. Needs might be different than we see today. So I don't know that shell space is necessarily that bad. I do think we need to finish the building off, but I think it also allows some flexibility there. That's been my experience. I do think we should not discount the high dollar amount that is here. This is a big number, but it is not, it has been something that staff and commissions over time have been working towards, and I think it represents a relatively reasonable cost for what we're doing. The building, the JLE is currently 50 years old. If we get 50 years out of this addition, I think we should feel really good. And so while I understand it's a big number, and I think that, but we have to recognize, you know, today I had someone come look at my fireplace, and because I have a gas leak, and I will tell you, that is a big number too, to replace something that seems simple as a gas leak. There are costs for the infrastructure that we must have, and I appreciate staff's work in getting that to a number that seems within our budget.
I also was going back through my notes, and September 1st, 2023 was when we had all options on the table. We had a lot of conversations that have led to this moment, and I've been comfortable with the things that we have put aside and said that is not the project we're looking for. I do think it is, you know, much less of a coincidence that we end up with something we can afford, as that we have kicked a lot of tires and pulled back on things that were, you know, wanted. And I know everybody, all of the departments that are in the conversation have made some sacrifices of what they're willing to live with as opposed to what they wanted, and I'm comfortable with that too. And early on, we made the decision, I think maybe even back at that meeting on September 1st, that we were not interested, and this is certainly a priority for me, of any you know, tax increase that would cover this cost, that all had to fit within the funds that had been saved and the funds that we had planned to use for the debt service, and we have done that. I also always appreciate Sarah's budget estimations and the conservative estimating that we do, so that we know that when we put these numbers forward, I have a lot of comfort that this is where we will land, and that also that there will be some capacity for the next part of the project. And I do agree. I think that I think we can reasonably look at finishing out the rest of that shelled space within a reasonable amount of time. I had to kick the tires on all of these alternates, but I think this is what the staff recommendation has been, is also where I would land with those. And wasn't sure I would be able to stomach that until I saw the numbers, but I am also comfortable with where we've ended. And I really appreciate the tremendous amount of work that everyone has put in to get us to this point. So commissioners.
Happy to make a motion if commissioners are ready.
Yes.
I just have one last comment, which is to sort of emphasize the need for this building and the use of this building is both buildings now, with the addition of a new one, is of significant public service and public use. You know, there are half a dozen or more agencies. I didn't do a full list, but I feel confident that it's 6 or more agencies and entities that are currently housed in that one building, and almost all of them, with a few exceptions such as evidence storage and, you know, the dispatch center, are for public use and public access, and one of the most regularly used buildings on a daily basis in our communities. So I just wanted to, I made a note to myself earlier to emphasize that, and just it is a large dollar amount. The investment in this infrastructure for our community is an investment in infrastructure that our community interacts with very regularly.
Thank you.
Motion to approve contract amendment 1 and the associated guaranteed maximum price proposal GMP with J.E. Dunn in the amount of $71,499,782 and a total county project budget of $81,982,074, and prepare the related documents as modified in this meeting for the chair to execute.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you all for your work on this.
You commissioners.
That does bring us to appointments. And I think we have some that are in the works. Does anyone have anything that they're ready to move on?
We did have a
I think
heritage one.
Yeah, Charlie
Okay.
Kuzmal for Heritage was one that we needed to act on. I can pull that up real quick.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's for Charlie Kuzmal. This is for Heritage Conservation, excuse me, Heritage Conservation Council. They're supportive of his. We've had this in our letter from Sarah a couple of times, and I know Charlie, and I'm happy to make this recommendation.
Happy to second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. Any others that we're ready to move on?
Think so.
Okay. Sarah, that brings us to your memo.
Thanks, commissioners. My memo's attached. Want to make sure commissioners understand that we've had a little clarity on the property tax rebate pilot program related to how we can treat veterans. And so we included this information. Jake and his team have been working with legal counsel and the clerk's office to get this clarity of disabled veterans and what we're able to ask for. And really, we're going to make it clear that these are veterans with a service-connected designation. And so we're going to improve our publication materials to that. And then also just want to point out that we have included the press release about avian bird flu in Douglas County. So that want to make sure commissioners have that. And we have no work sessions. And at this point in time, this is our second to last meeting of the year. We are on track to be back in the historic courthouse in 2025. So this is our second to last meeting in this building, assuming everything works out according to plan. And then our first meeting in 2025 will be the 15th of January. Commissioners, that's all I have.
Thank you. And I do appreciate the changing of language. That was a suggestion that came from the public about service-connected designation for veterans, and I'm very happy that's a much more honoring term, and I'm glad to have it. Thank you. Commissioners, any other miscellaneous items?
Nope.
Think so.
All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all.